recording either.
Oh, mine says recording now.
There it goes. Now we can
So
start.
we should probably start over.
Okay. I won't use jump the shark this time.
Oh no, it was great. We're a refined operation.
Hello and welcome to the Catholic Nerds Podcast, your primeval source for quality Catholic nerdery. This is Scott Smith,
Colby Allen,
Mary Reed,
And Cody Reed.
And we have a special guest tonight, Zac Mabry from the Roman Circus Podcast and from the greatest movie of 1994. It's not Forrest Gump. It's not Lion King. It's the Little Rascals. Welcome to the podcast, Zac.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
So, we're all dying to ask you questions about Little Rascals, but we know that you've probably been asked about that before at some point. So we'll try
maybe a few times, but I mean, ask away.
So my question, I think. In my extensive research for this podcast, I remember you saying that your favorite thing about the movie was getting to eat hot dogs every day.
Oh man, that's so fun. When did I say that? Okay, so I, as a kid, and actually as an adult, I have a very limited palate. Like I don't eat that many different foods. Okay. But it was really bad when I was a kid, and so when we'd be on the set, they would be serving these like amazing meals and steak and lobster and all this stuff, and then all I would eat every day was like boiled hot dogs, and they had to cut the ends off where like they're
joined.
Yeah, and the thing is the first time they did the hot dogs thing, I think they grilled them, and so there were like charred bits of it, and I like freaked out. So I was a very finicky eater with like. I was really averse to textures and that kind of stuff, and so I was all about the boiled hot dogs.
I guess that's a question about a kids movie. You think they put out a spread, the meals will be tailored towards children, right?
Well, I mean I'm pretty sure the other children were all about the fancy foods.
Man,
I mean steak. Like hell, get to be to love steak.
Yeah, so President Trump showed up at some point, right?
Yes, at the time he was not. I don't think anybody at the time thought he would ever be President Trump, but we did. We got to meet him.
We still don't think he'd be President Trump in most cases. Let's be real.
I know, seriously. Like with the State of the Union, it just like you look at it and it's so funny because you're like, it's so funny that Donald Trump is like literally the President of the United States of America. Mm-hmm. I mean, every time I see it, I'm like, surely this has been a joke all along, right? Like this can't isn't real, but it is.
See, I have this, real, not real conspiracy theory that he's
not real.
not Mitt Romney, but the real Manchurian Candidate. Getting in all our movies as kids, right?
Mm-hmm.
Home Alone 2, etc., etc. That was his ploy all along to get elected, to get stuck in our.
It was a long game.
It was
a
long game.
Yes,
that the Simpsons predicted.
Wait. Notice how you say long
that's
game
the craziest
and not
part.
long con, right?
No.
But I wanted to ask you, and you probably have gotten this question a couple times. We know it wasn't actually kitty litter, but what was in that sandwich?
Potato chips.
Potato chips. Okay,
yeah.
That makes sense. Okay.
So you did eat something besides hot dogs?
Well, no, because I wasn't.
Oh, it wasn't it? Crud.
Right, it was
Darlin. Confession time. I've never seen Little Rascals.
Really? Okay, that's funny. It's weird that like a lot of Catholics haven't seen it. I guess I mostly know Catholics, so maybe a lot of everybody hasn't seen it. But I always like when I meet people who haven't seen it because I'm like, okay, so like you're. You have like a different
completely ignorant of a perspective of ignorance. Yeah, I think I was an only child, and I was obviously a girl.
You think so? You think you're an only child? This isn't even my show, and I'm being sarcastic and rude.
Oh no, please crank it up.
I believe that there were no other children being hidden in other parts of the house. But I think there was like a perception by my mom that it was kind of a boys' movie, and that's why we never watched it. I'm really not sure, but we never saw it. And here I am, 20-something years later, still suffering the ill effects of not having seen it.
And that's a topic for another day, is her movie selection when she was growing up. Her mother edited movies for her.
My mom edited Disney movies so that they wouldn't be traumatizing.
So
wait,
example,
like from Friends? Like, was it like you'd watch Old Yeller and you're like, okay, the end?
Yes, exactly.
I know that it dies.
Like when
Get to
the
see
whole
like
Friends
the first
thing,
30 seconds of Bambi, and that's it.
Yeah, basically. No, literally, because she would.
Yeah, no, I need to hear examples.
She would copy, because you can make copies of VHSs. At least, okay. Hopefully, the statute of limitations has run out if this is incorrect. But what we were under the impression of was you could make personal copies for your own personal use. So she would make copies of VHSs and just skip over huge parts. So, like The Little Mermaid, Ursula makes 0 appearances in my version of Little Mermaid.
What?
None. So it goes from like her being in the like trove, seeing the statue of Eric, and she didn't want me to see the father coming in and being angry and blowing everything up, or Ursula or any of that. So all of a sudden, boom, she's got legs. She is on the sand, on the seashore, and ready to go. And we just skipped everything that led to that moment, or like Cinderella's dress getting ripped up. Too violent. Can't have
that is pretty violent. I mean, it is a
bit intense.
The mice had just made it. But
they put in so much
love
hard
that.
work.
No, well, there's an app for that now called VidAngel.
yes,
and it does literally. You can like decide what to filter out, and so.
So does it work?
And I love
Does
it. Yeah,
it
no,
work
it's really good. Yeah, like the main thing we liked it for was, well, one, it used to be cheaper and you could get movies faster, but then two, you could edit out like blasphemy and stuff, which is nice because it would just mute the sound. And so,
I like how we just say so nonchalantly, like blasphemy.
Edit out blasphemy.
Well, yeah, I was like trying to, but it would go into pretty, like, there were so many categories because it would break it down into like,
oh no,
like language, and violence. Yeah, and then it would be like, it was just all sorts of funny. But and then you can set your preferences. But so, basically your mom was the original VidAngel.
It's true. It's true.
Can you use VidAngel for like streaming?
Yeah, so what they did, I guess I don't have any affiliation with them. It's owned by Mormons.
This podcast is brought to you by VidAngel.
By the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints.
And the Mormon Tabernacle Choir.
And the Book of Mormon. So we're going to keep going. No, so what it is now, because they got in trouble for the way that they were distributing movies, even though their argument is that it's legal, is now it actually kind of sits on top of other streaming services. So you can link it to your Netflix, I think, or Amazon Prime, and then you pull those movies into VidAngel and you filtered those. The only catch is you have to subscribe to Netflix and pay for a subscription to VidAngel. But then, if it's about your eternal soul, why not?
Sure.
This is a game changer. Now I can finally watch like The Punisher with my wife, or all those Marvel shows on Netflix.
So the movie will be all of 20 minutes?
Yeah.
Basically the length of Little Mermaid.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, we did Star Wars Return of the Jedi, and we filtered out the bikini scene because we thought, okay, let's just filter it out. And it literally just skips the whole beginning. It kind of like it only skips when it's on screen, but that cuts out so much. So you're like, wait, did Jabba the Hutt die? So
he strangled to death. Who did this?
What is interesting, because I know when pureflix.com came out, I thought about subscribing to them, but not to say this is like in a mean way, but like they don't have that many great movies. And so like their service itself is an awesome concept, but mainstream movies are just not there. So VidAngel, like you said, being able to filter out unacceptable scenes from it's a different kind of an interesting concept.
Yeah, and I think it's good. I've always thought like we put a lot of fuss into like what we put in our bodies food wise. So I would think it'd be good to just be like aware of what you're consuming, other ways
Right.
too. And so,
So I wonder if I could put with it. So I used to do like mentoring in high schools and stuff, and I'd always do talks with these kids in high schools and teenagers to talk about concepts from movies. But I'm like, how many of you ever seen this movie? Okay, great. If you haven't seen it, don't see it. But here's an interesting point about that movie.
yeah.
So like, I don't know, maybe
We
it's
do
a way
that
to
on
kind
our
of.
podcast a lot. We're like, don't watch this movie, but there's this one scene.
I was like, one of my favorite movies to reference for kids is 8 Mile.
Oh,
confession, I never saw that.
Oh, you stole my
There you
confession.
go. Don't see it. I wouldn't recommend seeing it. But there are
Colby, I
definitely
think you
some.
and I are the only ones that have seen it here.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
But like one of the concepts at the end of the movie is about being vulnerable. So it's about rapping, right? So like the final rap battle. And I've talked to the kids about confession, right? To try to get kids to go to confession. Or to like how do you combat the enemy? But the end scene is, rappers always trying to tear down the other guy. So like, they're trying to tear him down for all his weaknesses. Well, the way he wins the final rap battle is he raps about all his own weaknesses. And so when it gets to the other guy and it's his turn, he literally has nothing to say about him. So just trying to use that as like an image, like like when you acknowledge your own weaknesses, the enemy has nothing on you. So,
Cool.
But how do you tell a high schooler, hey, here's this really interesting concept in this movie, but don't go watch it.
Right.
Yeah.
Just watch the last scene of.
Which would the whole last
Mom
scene
spaghetti.
would be.
Mom spaghetti. That's all you need to know.
You see, now I'm wondering if this is what Mom has been doing in her spare time, is like sitting in a little box, watching.
She's
like,
the vid
controlling
angel.
Yeah.
Your mom could have been a vid angel and been a millionaire.
Wow.
Yeah.
Boom.
And she's just been keeping that from us.
Well, dang.
Makes sense.
All the secrets.
So I basically had vid demon as a child because my my family. I had basically Mary and I are about the same age. I think I'm a little older, and my mom just. We had HBO, and the premise was that they didn't show anything terrible in the mornings, but that was a lie. Because I watched all kinds of stuff growing up, like like I was quoting Scrooged pretty much more than any Disney movie, by preteen years.
Scrooge, like the Bill Murray one?
Yeah, exactly.
Is that bad?
Not that that's bad.
I haven't seen it in a long time, but I probably was, 5 when I saw it the first time.
I mean, I think
less.
I probably had some nightmares about the little rat poking golf balls out of the, Marley's ghost kind of character.
Okay, yeah.
But,
Okay, yeah. Okay, I was like, wait, is that super inappropriate? I need to call my parents
Yeah.
up.
It's
Isn't
Bill
it
Murray.
funny
feel
how we
guilty.
watch movies when we were younger and then we watch them again when we're older with adult eyes and ears and we're like, holy cow.
Yes.
Or like when we thought it would be a good idea to invite a priest friend to watch Pitch Perfect with us, and we're like, oh gosh. You
That was
see
a
a movie
bad
with,
idea.
although he enjoyed it thoroughly, but like you see a movie with completely new eyes when you watch it with a priest friend than when
Yeah.
you don't.
So confession.
Yeah, let's hear it.
No, go ahead.
The other night we were watching the Super Bowl and we had a priest with us, and we somebody thought they were trying to explain to him who Cardi B was, and so they went to Cardi B's Instagram, and I was like, just never ever do that. But especially don't do it with a priest. The priest was pretty funny about it, but yeah, awkward moments.
Nice.
Awkward moments with priest friends. That could be a new segment.
Boom.
yeah.
Awkward moments with priest friends.
Well, y'all
Love
went
it.
to Disney with Father Brent, right?
We
Yes.
did.
Yeah.
But I want to hear Colby's confession.
Yeah, I want to hear that.
Yeah,
Oh no. Okay, so
Spill
talk about
the
seeing movies with different eyes. So I remember in high school it was when Superstar came out,
When
and we
what?
watched
Oh,
it.
Yeah.
So it's like the SNL kind of skit with Will Ferrell and what's the other lady's name? Just can't remember. Anyways, but I remember that movie for some reason in the context of being similar to Napoleon Dynamite, where it's just a goofy comedy. Years later, I remember sitting down and we were having a family movie night, and I was like, "Hey, let's watch this movie." I remember watching, a while back, and it was so good with my parents.
Oops.
And about 15 minutes into it, I'm like, "Yeah, let's not do this. It's not a good idea. This is not the way I remember this movie."
I tried showing my wife like all the John Hughes movies that I think anybody born like 1990 and after maybe didn't get to appreciate as much. Like we started watching Breakfast Club, and I couldn't believe how much how much they cuss in that movie is crazy. I'm surprised I didn't, pick that up more as a kid. Or maybe I did and I just blocked all that out.
You mentioned Father Brent going to Disney.
Yeah.
And this isn't really awkward, but it's just a fun story, real fast, is that when you go to Disney World, they give you different buttons to wear that say, like, first time or something like that, So they gave Father Brent one that said, I'm celebrating, and you could write whatever you wanted. So he wrote the Mass. Oh. I'm celebrating the Mass.
That's amazing.
So we're passing a worker, and he wasn't wearing his collar or anything. He was just wearing, like, a T-shirt and shorts or whatever. And he passes a worker at Disney, and they're like, oh, what are you celebrating? And he says, the Mass, because I'm a priest. And there's just this silence. And she's, like, looking for something to say, so he starts to walk away. And as we walk away, we hear her say, peace be with you.
And with your spirit.
He did. He said, I'm with your spirit. So anyway, that's, like, that's the main thing that stands out to me from that experience. It wasn't really awkward or anything, but it was pretty great. Perks of having a priest at Disney World.
I thought you were going to say he abbreviated celebrating to I am celibate.
I know, that would have been good too.
That would have been good. That would have been good.
Now we have to take him back.
Yep. Done.
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm. So
round 2.
So, Zach, I wanted, since this is kind of a podcast about nerding out about things in a Catholic sort of way, more or less, what are the things you nerd out about?
What are the things I nerd out about? I don't have like a medium. I'm usually either completely clueless and uninterested in something or a total nerd about it. I don't have a lot of medium topics. So, but like specifically Catholic stuff?
Sure, yeah.
Well, it can be Catholic. I nerd out about comic books and video game type stuff.
Nice.
And not just Catholic comic books. I do try to do some exegesis with it. But so basically anything.
Anything, yeah. Because I do economics or business type stuff. So, yeah. Anything that grabs your attention.
Yeah. Well, so currently I'm really big on stuff to do with the papacy and the Vatican. I used to have a pretty bad attitude towards the Holy Father. And lately that's not the case anymore. And I've been reading more about, how the Vatican operates as a city-state and the history of it. And it's really interesting, kind of the exterior manifestations of the Holy See and what's going on there. So that's been my latest topic. So I'm reading this book called, I'm not supposed to say what I'm reading yet, right?
oh, we're conflicted now.
You gave me like 2 instructions and I totally blew it.
Just go, man. Just
go ahead. Go
so
for
the
it.
book I'm reading is called Papal Monarchy. It's by Dom Prosper Guéranger, and it was published in the 19th century, and it kind of around the time of the First Vatican Council. But he does a good job explaining kind of the role that the Pope plays in governing the Church, because we talk a lot about theology and is he defining something infallibly, but separate from that is just his authority to govern the affairs of the Church. And so it's fascinating to me to understand how this works, especially the way that the Church relates to nations and all of that. So that's been my nerdy topic is that, which is I feel like that's almost as nerdy as you can get with Catholic stuff, but I could be wrong.
It's pretty nerdy, yeah.
I read a book not long ago. It's probably not as cool as that. This one's a little bit more on the pop culture side, but The Fisherman's Tomb. About the archaeological digs that took place, like funded by the Strake family from Houston to find St. Peter's body
in the 40s.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. That's. Sorry. I don't want to take over your.
Well, no. Actually, I bring
really
that.
Excited about that.
I bring that up because I think Mary had a connection. Wanted to ask you about a certain part of your conversion that dealt with that.
Okay, that's why I got excited. So
sweet.
Yeah.
Sweet.
Yeah.
So we saw in an article we read about you, not that we were reading articles about you, because that would be so weird. But I know, right?
Hey, confession, it wasn't me.
It wasn't him. It was me. That we saw that you had done the Scavi tour, which we had also done a few years ago when we were in Rome, and really blown away by it. And it sounded like it played a real big role in your conversion experience. And so
Yeah, I mean,
you could tell us about that.
Sure. I mean, I had an interest in the faith because I'd been to Mass with my grandmother before, and there was, Catholicism kind of had this appealing aspect because when I would read about it, I'd see, oh, this is so logical and so consistent. Like, this is interesting. But I didn't really see it as something that I was going to become a part of. Mostly just something that I could appreciate, but I was going to stay Methodist. When I was studying abroad, we did the Scavi tour, and we're going underground, and basically, I mean, that once we got there, where the there's that chapel, if you've done it, and then there's behind that, there's like the big glass, and you can see the graffiti tomb and all of that.
Yeah.
I'm just kind of standing there, and I'm thinking, okay, well, here's Simon Peter from the Bible. I mean, here's his body, and he was, clearly in Scripture, placed over the church by our Lord. And so if I want to be in the church that Jesus started, I have to be in the church, that Peter's in charge of. And so being there and realizing, upstairs is his successor. And, we had walked past this giant plaque that, listed all of the previous popes from Peter through, at the time it was Benedict. And I just kind of realized, well, I'm going to have to just get over my qualms about Catholicism and my hesitation. I obviously have to join this.
Yeah.
So yours was sort of an intellectual conversion more than, which I think is, to me, that seems like the rare, as opposed to like a emotional conversion.
Yeah, I mean, my emotions are no good decisions have come from my emotions, so wouldn't have happened. But yeah, no, it was interesting because I didn't. It's not like I had I did have Catholic friends, and my friend that was studying abroad with me became my sponsor. But ultimately, there wasn't anybody out like asking me to become Catholic, and so I always think about that nobody could have convinced me to do it, but then once I was going to convert, nobody could have convinced me not to. But it was kind of I didn't have anybody like invite me to, hey, why don't you become Catholic? I kind of called the parish myself and was like, how do I join? I can't go to RCIA. I have class during that, but what do I do? So
that's interesting, because actually one of my questions was, what would be your introduction moment to Catholicism? So like you said, you went to Mass with your grandmother, but would you say that moment was kind of like your just kind of aha moment where it kind of started from there?
Yeah, I mean, there was no turning back. Once I think that our professor had lied and said we were pilgrims so that we could do the Scavi tour. I'm not really sure, but the tour guide led our class, because it was just an art history class, led our class in the Our Father there at the tomb of St. Peter. And I bought the book that they were selling about the digs. But I mean, after that, there was just, it just was very clear to me, I've got to do this. And it was, almost in just a factual sense of like, well, I mean, quite literally, this is the church founded on Peter. And, they can prove this. They've got a body. So, yeah, I mean, there was no turning back after that. There was I was excited at first, and then there was some hesitation of like, I don't want to be Catholic, or I don't want to be, anything but that. Like,
I'm really getting into something here.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I looked for any out I could take. Like, could I become Episcopalian? That's respectable. And it just, yeah, and it just kind of came. There's no stopping it at that point, because I was just convinced, by the evidence that this was the church that Jesus had started, and so everything else, is, I'm gonna have to just come to terms with it.
Yeah.
Sounds like your will is less fallen than other people's, because it's awesome that you could decide on something and your will would just follow. That I wish that was the case with all of us.
And with every decision made, yeah.
I mean, there was a lot of grace, because I can't seem to get that level of follow through with much else. But I did become Catholic after deciding to become Catholic.
So you mentioned being Methodist, right?
Mm-hmm.
So would you, how long of a period was since, you had that moment to, you either went through RCA or, you had your moment into the church to confirm?
So it was May 2011 when I was in the Holy See, and I came to the church the following Easter.
Wow, so pretty quick.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't start RCIA in the fall, and I thought I was going to have to put it off another year. But when I, over Christmas break, once, school slowed down again, I was like, no, I've got to do this. Let's do it. So I called up a priest while I was home and got his advice. And he said, for the most part, RCIA shouldn't be a barrier. So if you can't go, talk to a priest. They'll find some way to do it. And so then when I got back to Norman, I went and talked to the priest, Father Goins, at the parish there, and he's like, yeah, if you can't do RCIA,
That's
I can
Norman.
work with you one-on-one, and we can bring you in at Easter.
Norman, Oklahoma, or?
Yeah, I went to the University of Oklahoma.
Oh, you went to OU? Cool. I lived in Edmond and went to high school up there.
Which Edmond North, or which one?
Oh, wow, you know him. Edmond Memorial.
Okay. Yeah, I don't know if I knew. Most of my college friends went to Edmond North, actually.
Wow, that's crazy. And the other crazy thing...
Yeah, I knew all about Balto Week.
Yes, and we had Swine Week, where the teachers all kissed pigs if you raised enough money and stuff like that. Yeah, that's good times, yeah.
That's exciting.
Hey, that's
No, you guys would raise like six figures.
Oh, yeah,
Cool.
I mean, my year, so that was 2001 and 2000, we raised like 200,000, I think, and then it just kept going up and up. Actually,
Wow.
the year after I graduated, the senior prank got on Letterman because they threw like raccoon scent into the lunch area, and it created like this just this mob and riot. It was insane. But
Wild and crazy time.
Raccoons.
We did not know this about you, Scott. We're going to talk about this later.
I know. Well,
We'll have to rethink some things.
seriously, yeah, that was all confession too. So I fulfilled that part of the show. But I wanted, Zach, you said this all happened. The Scavi tour you took was May 2011, right?
Yes.
So that's crazy because my wife and we were married May 20th, 2011, and then went to Rome right after. We were what's called the Spousy Novelli, that, we kind of sit in a little special section on the dais.
And you wear your wedding dress and stuff?
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah.
And that was, with Pope Benedict, and we got the papal blessing. It was super awesome. But that you'd think, being all of us from Louisiana, right? You think that being from Louisiana, wearing a suit or wearing a wedding dress in that Roman sun wouldn't be all that bad, but they actually had to call a monk-driven golf cart. My wife was actually passing out in that heat.
Oh my god.
Oh my god.
Oh, wow. Well, I mean, it was hot when I was there. I mean, I like, just by walking around as much as we did and how hot it was, I think I lost like 15 pounds on that trip.
Yeah, you do a lot of walking,
crazy.
yeah. Yeah, but anyway...
I had been
and-
pretty lazy
and-
before that in school, so I mean...
So right at that same
weight.
time,
yeah,
right at that same time, Cody and I were like basically just getting to know each other on the trip to Medjugorje in Bosnia. So I don't know. I just think it's funny that all these things were happening at the same time.
Yep.
In that 1 month. What were you doing, Colby? In your time?
11?
May of 11. Yeah.
I think that was the last month of my missionary year with the diocese.
Oh, that's cool.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I was finishing up the missionary year in Homa and then moving to Lafayette like the next month.
Cool.
Excellent.
Not as cool, but cool.
No, definitely not. I was walking away from the church at that time.
Oh,
Yeah, we're touring.
Nice.
well, that sounds awkward.
Which Colby, we haven't mentioned that you're also a convert to the
No,
faith.
sure. Actually,
Oh.
one of the things I want to share. So I'm also a convert. So a little bit of your story. I won't say
Very nice.
the intellectual aspect of it was fairly similar, but for me, it was a study of history.
Mm-hmm.
Growing up Southern Baptist, and then in high school, that's one reason I asked you too, like the time frame in your conversion, because mine is a little different in that I first encountered or had my introduction moment when I was 16. My father grew up Catholic, and so when I went to talk to my parents about it, my dad had the attitude of "been there, done that," and I don't want you to do it. And so
When was this?
This was 14 years ago.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so, but I was 16 at the time, so my parents were, me being a minor, not quite on board. So I had to wait 2 years to go to RCA. The whole time, joining my friends with their life team group and going to different conferences. But one of the good parts of the story was when I actually was able to go to RCA, my mom and my brother joined me. So it became our conversion story. Wow. Yeah, so my whole family, actually, my mom was one of 8 children. My great-grandfather was a Southern Baptist French missionary that paddled up and down the bayous in South Louisiana to start Baptist churches. So to say that, Southern Baptist roots run deep in my family is actually kind of an understatement. My grandfather is actually still a Protestant minister. However, 6 out of those 8 families have all converted or reconciled with the church.
Wow.
So
that's that's wow.
Sure. So, and also, like you said, not actually go through RCA. So actually 2 of those families did not go through RCA, but either had a family special concession for their confirmation, or my aunt actually just got permission from the bishop and the priest in their parish. She did a few classes and was able to be confirmed.
Nice.
So yeah, it's an interesting. But mine was, not really a profound, tour of the Vatican, but more of a study of history, and looking at my Protestant pastor and say, well, where is your link to the primacy of Peter? It's not quite there. So we need to figure out where this is coming from,
I mean, some of them act like it, though. They basically say that you had these, fully Baptist groups, but they were just being constantly persecuted by Catholics. But it's funny because so much of Protestantism is wrapped up in, ideas from, the Renaissance and the Enlightenment and all that. And you're you do know that these thoughts hadn't been invented yet, right? There's no way that you... But,
Have Zach, since becoming Catholic, so that's 2012 or so? I mean, have you encountered any external resistance? Have you? I guess persecution's is a strong word in America. But have you experienced any negative aspects of being Catholic from non-Catholics?
From non-Catholics specifically?
Well, I guess, yeah, it could be within the church, too.
No, I mean, I think the deal with that is that non-Catholics maybe historically were pretty fervently anti-Catholic, obviously because they split off, so it all started from one conflict or another. But I feel like now there's, especially in America, I don't think that there's a whole lot of teaching being passed on in Protestant circles, and so I'd never really encountered the serious anti-Catholicism from non-Catholics. However, I will say that Catholics tend to be somewhat hostile about certain topics. I guess when you get really excited about the faith, I think Catholics who are lukewarm take that negatively, and they can be kind of hostile to it.
Right.
To try to put that as diplomatically as possible.
Oh, I think you succeeded in that, whereas most of us usually fail in that regard. When this podcast airs, it will be the Mardi Gras season, basically, for us here in Louisiana. Mardi Gras being, as the rest of the world rightly calls it, the day before Ash Wednesday, right? The focus maybe should be more on Lent than Mardi Gras, but have you ever been down here for Mardi Gras?
Not for Mardi Gras. I came down summer of 2010 and had a great time, but it was summer, so it was not super crowded. I mean, we still had to go out, and I tried the hand grenade drink, which I love.
Yeah.
Wait, hold on. Just kidding.
The hurricane?
No, because it was the hand grenade, but since this was 2010,
I get you.
and I turned 21 in 2011.
It was
Statute of
somebody else.
Limitations, right?
It was
yeah, it was the
somebody who
person you were
looked like
with, right?
it was one of
It was pseudo Zac Mabry.
it's one of those Shirley Temple hand grenades.
Yeah, it was this. It was a mocktail hand grenade. No, yeah, but I enjoyed it. It was I liked basically just the layout. I mean, because that's the problem. Not the problem. I mean, I love Oklahoma and Texas, but they're both Texas less so, but Oklahoma. They're built in a very kind of American Protestant way, where it's a grid.
Yeah.
Whereas
Land run,
Catholic. Right? Yeah. Land run, and I mean, really just also if you notice, like Protestant dominated cultures build these sort of efficiency minded it's part of like the Protestant work ethic almost. And then the Catholic towns, especially throughout Europe and former Christendom, is, if you notice, they're laid out in this more organic way. So everything may not be straight lines and grids and stuff, but you've got like a church and then these open piazzas and then the house. You can go everywhere. So you see a little bit of that in the parts of the United States that were more Catholic at some point. And so New Orleans was one of those, and a lot of California is like that, in my opinion.
Well, see,
Santa Fe, New Mexico is like perfectly Catholic. The layout, not the.
So I definitely noticed that. So like the major cities here are mostly centered around the cathedrals. It's like the heart of downtown is usually either the cathedral or the cathedrals within a few blocks of the courthouse and the other, major municipal buildings. I definitely echo your sentiment, because like being in business, I travel sometimes for work, and I'm always amazed with the difference in either commercial layouts of like commercial districts within Louisiana versus other cities. And actually I kind of like the way it is in other cities sometimes, because it's a lot easier to navigate. But I get what you're saying about the perspectives and how the just the towns are laid out.
Yeah, I think one of the points of having not so much the steeple, but the cathedral being the tallest building in town for most of Western civilization, till the skyscrapers and Bauhaus came around. But
it's a fun story about being tallest building. Sorry, I don't want to cut you off.
Oh, you're good. I'm just rambling.
So some friends of mine, we just took a trip to Mexico City back in July, and one of the things we learned. So, has anyone been to Mexico City or no?
No.
I've never been.
Okay,
in
so
our dreams.
It is
confession.
There you go.
I'm catching on.
It's extremely dynamic in that, like, there's this very beautiful aspects of the city next to the slums. But one of the things that caught my attention was the cathedral, the Metropolitan Cathedral. So in Aztec culture, right, basically to tell either the chieftain or the high priest of the one that you take over, kind of a middle finger gesture, is to build your temple higher than his.
Nice.
And so what they would do is, over generations, some of them, once they conquered that area, they would build their temple on top of the existing temple, right?
And their temple's already pretty tall, like their step pyramids, right?
Yeah. So get this. So in the downtown, in the Metropolitan, there were generations of 7 temples that were built on top of one another. Once the Christian missionaries came in, what they did was tear down those 7 temples and build the Metropolitan Cathedral with those stones.
Wow.
Only a few feet higher than the previous temple.
That's awesome.
And so it's kind of like this major, like, just impactful statement of, like, we're tearing down everything you've already built, and we're building something way more beautiful with those stones. Oh, and also a couple feet higher.
It's like even better than the Pantheon.
I mean, it's right there too. So like, it's the ruins of those temples, literally next to the Metropolitan Cathedral.
It's interesting because you can kind of see God working through history in the way that certain cultures, like the Aztecs, certain things about their religious practices at the time that the missionaries arrived were sort of prepping them for hearing the gospel. Just different aspects of sacrifice and blood sacrifice. We had a priest that used to preach on this pretty well, and it's interesting because he explains it in a way that makes you kind of understand and appreciate sort of some of the more diverse practices that exist before a place is evangelized. Is that there's always some tie-in that they've already held to that makes it them ready for the gospel right about the time in history when it arrives.
Sure.
So it's pretty cool.
It was a good point, because even I think the image of Our Lady of Guadalupe is supposedly the most impactful image of evangelization in the history of the church.
Definitely.
Oh yeah, I mean, I think they said like 10 million Catholics in Europe left the church to become Protestant, and 10 million people in Mexico entered the church in pretty short span.
Yeah, I think 9 million. Yeah, pretty much right there. And then it's still at least in the Western Hemisphere, maybe in the world, the most visited holy site, not just Christian holy site.
Really?
Yes.
Which is crazy.
I didn't know that.
Which is
So
crazy
we were there,
to think about.
I wouldn't say it was the off season, but we were just like a random day in July, and it was packed. I mean, it was insane. So I can imagine on holy or feast days, what it's like to be there.
So yeah,
I'd love to see it one day.
I'm looking.
It's an experience. I definitely recommend it.
So yeah, I confirmed. It's the third most visited sacred site in the whole world.
Wow.
And another interesting thing, because I mean, we could have a whole podcast on Our Lady of Guadalupe. It's just one of the things I learned recently was that the tilma, the way that the image is on the tilma, because the tilma is that rough fabric made of cactus fibers. The way that the image sits on the tilma, depending on your vantage point of how close you are to Our Lady and what angle, she'll shift her ethnicity. She'll shift from being either Spanish looking or a native Aztec looking, like a native Mexican looking. Because and that was meant to be sort of a wedding of the two cultures that were having a lot of conflict together. So she's trying to bring them both together with that, which is mind blowing.
Right, and then
wow, I'd never heard that.
Yeah, it's mimicking how like the carapace of a beetle, like a beetle's shell, like it has that kind of iridescent color quality when you look at it from different angles. It's basically doing that, which you cannot do. An artist cannot create that, using natural means.
Wow.
And Our Lady of Guadalupe, if I'm not mistaken, and I could be mistaken, is one of the only images of Mary, one of the only visions of Mary where she's still pregnant.
Yes.
Yeah.
Signified by the black ribbon above her waist.
Her belly, yeah.
Yeah, that I think represents that she's a virgin, which she's pregnant and she's wearing the virgin belt from the Aztec society, but also they've had OBGYNs look at the way she's standing, her posture, and measuring the circumference of her belly. They're able to estimate what would be her due date. And so Our Lady of Guadalupe, that's December 12th or 13th? 12th.
12th.
So she's due in just a couple weeks based on the image. So what does that tell you, That's like one way of confirming the Christmas birth of Christ.
Interesting.
Cool.
Wow. That's amazing. I didn't know any of this. I mean, Our Lady of Guadalupe is one of my favorites, but I honestly didn't know a lot of these things.
Yeah.
All kinds of stuff.
It's pretty cool.
So, I mean, yeah, it's like every time you go back to Our Lady of Guadalupe, you can find out some new amazing, miraculous thing about her. She's just like the gift that keeps on giving.
Just keeps on giving.
Because they're still finding out
Because
new
Mary's
stuff. Yeah.
Yes.
They're still finding out new stuff about her all the time. Like research.
Yeah, well, that's how it goes. If you think so, she's the most perfect human person, and when she was actually alive, walking the earth, nobody knew her. And nobody had any idea that this absolutely perfect human person was maybe their next door neighbor, and then 2,000 years later, we know her more, but it's been such a gradual reveal, even though it is all there at the beginning. But the people that live next door to her probably knew less about her than we do.
Right.
Oh
Right.
yeah. That's a beautiful way of looking at it, because it makes you just look at your neighbor differently, right?
True.
Of course.
Wow, yeah.
Of course, I live next to Tractor Supply, so that's
Nice.
A little different.
Mm-hmm.
So, did I see something about that? The guy who played Alfalfa also converted to
Bug Hall,
Catholicism.
right?
Oh yeah, that's
Yeah. So Bug Hall was Alfalfa. We actually weren't super close as kids because I was the youngest Little Rascal and he was the oldest.
Right.
And a 4-year age difference isn't a big deal, except when you're
Right.
or no, a 5-year. But when you're 4 years old and 9 years old, that's a
Right.
it's
big amount of space.
Yeah.
And so we hadn't kept in touch after the movie. I mean, especially back then when you were 4, you didn't have a smartphone like you do now, sadly. But and then at some point we followed each other on Twitter, kind of out of politeness, just sort of out of, well, yeah, I know who that person is. Never paid attention to each other. And so I came into the church in 2012. In 2012. And was it 2014 when it was a year after Pope Benedict had announced his resignation, or his plan to resign, not the resignation itself. I tweeted, today's 1 year since Benedict announced his plan to resign. I don't remember what it was. Something about Benedict XVI. And Bug retweeted it, and I thought he was making fun of me for some reason. But I decided to just kind of be a jerk about it and act like he was being sincere, even though I'm certain that he was making fun of me. So I messaged him. I sent him a DM and was like, "Hey, that's cool. I'm glad that you're a fan of Benedict XVI." And then he responds, "Yeah, I was reading a lot of Ratzinger around my baptism last year." And I was like,
Oh my
Well,
God.
dang.
he said the shibboleth of Ratzinger, so you knew it was real.
Right. And so, yeah, I mean, we hadn't had any contact, and I came to the church in 2012. He came in 2013.
Wow.
And when this happened in 2014, we found out we were both living in the Dallas area.
God.
So we went to Mass together shortly after, and then technically we reconnected, but we weren't like BFF as kids. So we really became friends through this, and now I consider him one of my best friends. I was in his wedding just about 2 years ago. Their anniversary is coming up. Remind me on the 11th. Our Lady of Lourdes.
Oh, nice.
But
Nice.
yeah, and so it's been neat because I mean we have very different backgrounds, but we do have some shared experiences, and then we've both been being converts. I don't know. It's been a cool thing to have that connection and have that be kind of how we reconnected.
That's awesome.
Definitely, that's like a crazy convergence that would.
Yeah.
Well, that's Providence.
I mean, I'm telling you, like, I was in shock that day. I still remember because it was during busy season 2014, which was like my worst busy season.
Busy like tax
No,
season, or
second worst. Well, at the time I was doing external audit, so it was like for financial statement reporting, which
I don't
doesn't
think
have
we've
anything to do with.
mentioned. Have we mentioned your career
Oh, sure,
until
what-
now? I don't think.
Yeah.
Hopefully not. No, I'm just kidding. But we were working, nights, weekends. It was wild, and I just remember being in shock. And I was like, I don't know how I'm going to focus on work. This is crazy. Like this guy, was in Little Rascals with me. I haven't seen him in 20 years, and he converted. And at the time, I didn't really have Catholic friends, so I always would go to Mass by myself, and I just didn't. I kind of did my own thing. I didn't have, a group of Catholics that I hung out with or talked about the faith with, so I would
Right.
just watch EWTN and go to Mass. So
Just hang out with
it was,
Mother
it was really
Angelica.
exciting.
It's
I
like
know Mother.
the-
They need to make her a saint.
Yes.
Well, but
It's
now,
like
I mean,
the Catholic Netflix and chill. Like I just EWTN and chill.
I know.
Yeah.
I feel bad because eventually you get very tired of EWTN. Like anyone I know that's watched it, eventually you stop watching it.
Like-
And I did hit that point.
well, my
not
aunt
too
watches
long
it
after.
just to listen to the Divine Mercy. I don't think I've never actually sat down and watched EWTN. But you're at Dallas now, which is a great Catholic hub, right? I mean, because y'all have, from what I've heard and experienced, some good young adult ministry out there. Or also, I used to be a part of Young Catholic Professionals, and that's where the kind of started, right? Are you part of that?
Yeah, we have.
Yeah.
I am. Sorry, but someone else from, or is anyone else from Dallas? You guys are all Louisiana?
All Louisiana.
Yep.
Okay, sorry. Yeah, Dallas has really great young adult stuff, is what I would call it. So, Young Catholic Professionals started here.
Right.
And so we have like the first chapter, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a member of that. I don't make it out to the activities as much as I wish I did, but I do enjoy being a member and going to some of the panel discussions and the happy hours. But then the first parish I joined when I came to Dallas was St. Thomas Aquinas, and in 2014 they started a young adults group. So that summer I joined the young adults group there, and then it's become this amazing ministry. You know, one of the people that volunteered to help with it at the beginning is now a full-time employee at the parish to run the young adults program. I mean, it's been so successful, and it's reached so many people, and there have been marriages, there have been, you know, people finding religious and priestly vocations, and my best friends in Dallas are all people I met through, or not all, I have other friends too, no offense to any of them, but like my core circle of friends that I, you know, talk to all the time pretty much all tie back to St. Thomas Aquinas young adults. And so I go to a different parish now for mass and other activities, but I'll pretty much always stay involved in the STA young adults until they kick me out when I'm no longer technically a young adult. But
What do they do?
we'll have to start old adults after that.
What do they define it as? Because I know sometimes they don't want to put an age on it because you don't actually want to put people
They
in
don't
brackets.
put an age.
Right.
Yeah, I was part of the core team for Young Catholic Professionals out here in New Orleans for 2 years, and just kind of finished up our two-year anniversary there. But I'm also the Young Knights of Columbus co-chair.
Oh, the extremist Knights of
No,
Columbus.
yeah, the radical Knights of Columbus.
I know. I'm like explaining to non-Catholics that are asking about it. I'm like, literally, I've never heard of anything that they do other than pancake breakfasts. But sure, I'm sure that
evil
wickedly-
pancake breakfast.
Yeah.
Evil pancake breakfasts. We invite Santa Claus to come. You got to remember that. All right, they're bad.
And what is
The indulgent fried fish dinners on Fridays and Lent.
Yeah, that's right.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, so
So decadent.
But we defined young adult as like under 50.
yeah, that's right.
A very
That's like
young.
that's like for most of human history longer than you lived. Like I don't like 50, you'd be like the village wizard. Like I don't even.
Yeah, you'd have underlings by that point. Yeah, so I'm in the Casey's too, and or as I like to call them, the anti-Masonic party. And
I know. See, I've Masons on one side of my family, and it's a battle I'm always having to fight.
oh wow,
I
we
know.
recently, my wife's uncle, great uncle, passed away, and he was like me, which I always have to bring this up, a fighting Texas Aggie.
Oh God!
So
I thought we were gonna have one episode without it. I was really excited.
So we thought they sent us kind of a box of inherited items, and we were hoping it might be some, quality Aggie gear, but it was all his Masonic gear, and we were like, now what do we do with this? Do I have to bury this? Do I have to burn? What do I do with it?
Yeah, I'd probably
Great
burn
question.
Burn it.
It's hard because it's sentimental because it's like your family member who you love. But I just decided, like, I just was like, you've just gotta. Because one of my great grandparents was a Mason, and that's what. Whenever I bring up how bad the Masons are, my dad's always like, "Well, you're talking about Grandpa Dozier when you say that," and so I'm always like, "Well, I just have to think that in the next life he's glad that I'm opposing this, and he,
Yeah, when I don't know if so. Where were you in Oklahoma? Where did you grow up? Besides Norman.
I grew up in Tulsa, or just outside of Tulsa, in
I
Broken Arrow,
gotcha.
and then went to Norman once I went to college.
Because we in Guthrie, which is granted it is an old state capital, right, of Oklahoma.
It's like the coolest little town.
Yeah, they filmed like Twister there, I think. But it had
Nice. I tried out for Twister, but they didn't. They got rid of my character.
So you actually had some scenes, or
No, before it even. I mean, the part that I tried out for was going to die really early, and then they replaced it, and they killed the dad instead.
So what? Yeah, I wanted.
Like when he blew away on the door, that was going to be me.
Yeah.
Not necessarily. That was
like,
the part I tried out for.
Oh,
But they
That's
decided
like
to be
one
too
of the first-
traumatizing.
That's
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
after post.
You
Like,
probably
my
didn't even
mom
know. Did I
editing-
just spoil that for you, Mary?
No. No, post my mom editing all my movies, that scene was like one of the first traumatizing scenes I ever saw, and it's not even that bad, but so it sticks with me. Like whenever anyone mentions the dad blowing away, I'm like, oh no.
well,
Not that.
another traumatizing scene in that movie is the scariest scene. Like for me in all film is that right when the Guthrie drive-in movie theater screen blows away, they're doing the scene from The Shining where he's in his big wheel, going around the carpeted hotel hallways, and then all of a sudden it's the sisters, right, that pop up right when like the twister blazes through. So
I know those sisters are scary.
they're the worst.
I don't trust twins because of that.
So what were you? Because I know you stepped away from acting or child act, whatever. At some point, what you were into it for a few movies there. How did that all go down?
Sure. So I did the Little Rascals, and it was kind of random. Basically, my parents, when they first got married, had lived in Dallas. We were up in Tulsa, and they saw that there'd be this open casting call for a remake of Little Rascals, and so the whole idea was just for them to come down to Dallas, see friends and stuff they used to do, and then for fun, I would try out for this movie, and then later they would tell me that I tried out for a movie when I was 3.5 years old, and then against any expectation, I got the part. So, my mom had just given birth to my brother, so he's still newborn essentially, and we pack up and go to LA to shoot the movie. After Little Rascals, there were other movies that came up as opportunities, but my parents had a rule that I could only be in a movie if the movie start to finish was appropriate for my age at the time. So, being 5 years old, I could be in a movie only if the entire movie start to finish was appropriate for a 5-year-old. So the other parts that I got had things in them that weren't appropriate. My parents or my mom and agent would send back, okay, if you'll cut these things, he can do it. And they would say, well, we've got, 1,000 kids who their parents would literally let them smoke a cigarette if we paid them. So,
Oh my gosh.
I mean, that's an exaggeration, but basically, for the most part, there's plenty of parents who, unfortunately, just will put their kids in anything. So we turned all those down, just like a handful of things. And I kept looking for other parts, and we would go back, and I would do auditions and stuff, but there actually weren't any other movies that I did. I did commercials. And then once I was 9, decided I didn't like, because we'd go back to Oklahoma, I'd be in school, then I have to pull out of school for a few months to go to auditions and shoot commercials and look for new movie parts. And once I was 9, I was like, I don't want to leave my friends. I don't want to leave school. I just want to be normal. So we stayed home after that.
Yeah, because Spanky was like the Smucker's jelly kid for a while, right?
Welch's grape juice.
That's it.
Welch's, that's right.
I know, and that was, that was. I wish I'd gotten that contract. That was.
Regrets.
I know.
Well, we're getting to be about that time. Any last pressing awesome questions for Zac before we wrap it up?
So I got one quick question, and this kind of ties into my Whatcha Reading.
Oh yeah, we skipped that entirely.
Your recent fascination with the Pope. Have you ever read the book The Pope and the CEO?
No.
Okay, so I know you're a CPA, right?
Yeah.
So business minded, you kind of work around business all the time. This book called The Pope and the CEO. I read it a while back and actually wanted to start rereading it again, but Andreas Widmer was a papal guard, Swiss papal guard. Once he finished with that, he kind of went into business consulting. And so he wrote this very short book on his experience with meeting the Pope and how like his experiences and influences about being around the Pope impacted his life within business consulting.
Oh wow!
It's fairly simple, when it comes to like strategy or like that type of stuff. But but it's very good. So if you haven't read that, I would recommend it.
Cool. Yeah, I'll check it out. I just pulled it up on Amazon, so I won't forget. That's neat. Thank you.
No problem.
Is there anyone else? Well, I guess Cody needs to introduce the the Whatcha Reading segment.
Yeah, so Whatcha Reading?
Oh God.
Are we going to explain the reference there?
I don't know if you've ever watched Phineas and Ferb, but it's a play on Isabel's intro every time she walks into the scene and greets Phineas and Ferb with a "What you doing?" So we have Whatcha Reading.
So now we're stuck with this.
Yeah.
Nice. I have never seen Phineas and Ferb, but I'm actually maybe interested in watching it now.
Oh, there you go.
There you go.
You just
There you go.
evangelized
Because of
Phineas
Cody's
and Ferb.
Brilliant.
There you go.
Boom. One of the greatest kid shows of all time, in my opinion.
So I'm not reading anything particularly Catholic right now. I'm still reading John Bosco's Dreams, but I started the Graveyard Book by Neil Gaiman recently. The premise is this boy survives the murder of his family by crawling off, like he's an infant, crawling off into a graveyard, and he's raised by ghosts. And some, less desirables besides a ghost, but it's a pretty cool premise. It's almost like he goes to purgatory, It's almost, but so that's what I'm reading.
Alright.
I think that happened to a friend of mine once.
Yeah. It's a household thing.
Yeah. I've completely caught up on Walking Dead, and yes, reading, not the show, but the graphic novel, and it's getting so intense. Even more so, kind of like pitting the idea of this new civilization versus bringing back an old civilization based on the caste system. So it's really interesting where they're going with it.
That's like the alphas and the betas and that kind of stuff.
Kinda, yeah. Like basically, they're doing it based off of what you were before everything went to pot. Would determine what you get set up with in this new society, and how well off you'll be set up. So it's interesting. I'm also working on the Marvel Secret Invasions, which is fun. And I can talk more about that later. And the Hunt for Wolverine.
Oh, you love Wolverine.
As far as specifically Catholic, I do. I'm excited about the new Avengers movie coming out because Wolverine will be there. I've been working my way through Benedict XVI Spe Salve. I mentioned that last time. John Paul II Fides Oratio and Augustine Confessions, but more specifically focusing on Spe Salve, talking about kind of what faith is kind of very interesting. Still kind of in the beginning stages of it, but it's a lot of fun to kind of parse through the kind of the depth of what he's saying. So, anyways, that's what I'm reading.
I've been reading articles about this guy named Zac.
There aren't that many, but there's like the Epic Q one that Teresa did, and then I feel like that's all.
Maybe there were two. Articles / podcast description. Along with
The Crunch, anyway.
Yeah, some very thrilling renditions of the Very Hungry Caterpillar. I feel like
that's Eric Carle, right?
Yeah, we need better feminist representation here than I'm providing.
Yeah, at least talk about Brown Bear, seriously.
I know, right? I have a considerable sized stack of books next to the bed that I have every intention of reading in the near future. So yeah, probably the next book I'm going to tackle. That'll be my goal by the next podcast to have started Scott Hahn's Understanding Our Father. So I'm putting that out there so that now I'm going to be held accountable. Yeah, that I have to have something to say.
You mentioned on the last episode, right?
Yeah.
I mentioned that we had it.
But now you're committing to reading it.
Right.
Exactly.
Right. Exactly.
Nice.
So yeah.
Nice.
Also, if y'all will pray, ask for the intercession of, any of the above, St. Thomas a Kempis, Louis de Montfort. I'm trying to update. We're doing a Marian consecration for the upcoming men's conference, and I've been updating the language of, all the readings for the days of Marian consecration, because, it's amazing how quickly the these and thys go over a lot of our guys' heads. So help me make sure I'm not butchering the wonderful gift that St. Louis de Montfort has given us.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
I love that. That's one of my favorite devotions.
Well, we have a series of videos we're doing too, so I'll have to send them to you, and you can tell me if we've completely missed the mark.
I'm probably not a good judge of that, but I'll try. I like watching videos,
Videos are good.
And hey, he could come to the men's conference
That's right.
whenever it
Unless
is.
it's already
When
sold
is
out.
it?
It's March 9th, so it's always the first Saturday of Lent. It's this organization we started, the Men of the Immaculata, and every year we have 1,000 men at. Well, all we can really do is 1,000 because we filled up the largest local church, right?
You can't fit them anymore.
So we have to go to the Superdome is our next step.
Nice.
Clearly the only next.
Clearly the
Yeah.
only next option,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, and that not that
Yeah, and then... Oh, sorry, go ahead.
I was gonna say not that even though it's the home of the saints, it doesn't count as sacred space.
This is true.
Yeah, and so then I kind of mentioned it, but the book I'm reading is called The Papal Monarchy, and the time period is just before the First Vatican Council, and there was just a lot of debate happening about what the papacy was about, because it was clear to everyone that the Pope was about to be, deprived of the Papal States because of the Masonic revolutionaries in Italy doing the overthrow, and realizing that so much of the understanding of the Pope now that was sort of just there, was now going to have to be explicitly spelled out, because what was his role going to be now that he doesn't have territory? He had always had this spot that he ruled, and now he was going to be. They didn't even know if they would get to keep, Vatican City at that point. So it's interesting the arguments about how the church is governed, and the way authority is divided up, or I guess the way it isn't divided up. But it's fascinating, and it puts a neat perspective on today, because I think diplomatically, a lot of Catholics get nervous about Pope Francis, and the more that I read about the papacy and the history of the papacy, the more I can appreciate Pope Francis and also not be worried about it, and I can enjoy this papacy more, whereas for a while I was pretty sour on how things were going.
I was actually, I listened to, I think it's one of your episodes in your podcast where y'all talk about respecting the office but not the man. Was that in one of your episodes? I can't remember some.
Well, if it was, and that may have been before, I have a point on that.
Sure.
Do we have time? Can I make it?
Yeah,
real
go
quick?
for it.
So I guess look at it this way. You've got the man in the office, so the man being Pope Francis, Jorge Mario Bergoglio, and then the office is the papacy established by Jesus Christ, head of the church. If you do want to, I guess, just in your mind separate them and realize, the man is a man, but the office, it's of critical importance. I mean, it's you're in the church if you're subject to the Pope. You're in kind of this gray area at best if you're not subject to the Pope. And think about how much respect an office like that. I mean, the president of the United States was established by the Constitution. The ruler of any country was established through, this and that. I mean, the papacy was established by Jesus himself. So, separating it, thinking about how much you owe it, well, then realize there's no practical way to separate the man from the office.
Right.
So you can't, say, I'm only genuflecting to your office. I don't like you.
Right.
I mean, so you can intellectually separate them for the sake of realizing how important the office is, and then realize that there's no practical way to actually separate them.
Right.
So, and there is a lot to really like about this Pope. But it's also important to understand the importance of the papacy, and that, what I would tell people who are strong critics of Pope Francis is that, let's say the next Pope is the exact Pope that you're dreaming of. If you spent Francis' entire papacy tearing down the office to get back at Jorge Bergoglio, your super Pope that's your perfect choice is going to have to spend his whole papacy gaining all that territory back.
Right.
So it doesn't make sense for Catholics and Catholic institutions to be opposed to the Pope, even if maybe they disagree with this or that about his style.
Right.
Style.
Yeah, no, it kind of reminds me, because you made an earlier point about how converts can be a great asset to the church, but also kind of a thorn, and our zealousy for certain aspects of matters of faith and morals. Because we had an incident here with one of the high schools where there's a group of, I wouldn't call them friends, I would call them good acquaintances. They're all converts, and there were some discrepancies with the leadership of the church, and they were very vocal about either their oppositions or their concerns, quote unquote, with the new papacy, and it caused some hiccups with the leadership within their schools and their teaching positions. And they actually ended up losing their jobs because of it. It was fairly traumatic.
Wow.
Yeah, but again, it's kind of like you're saying, there is no logical way to really separate the man from the office if that is what the Lord himself ordained. And so, I've seen firsthand, as we've talked about, some of the issues that can cause, and there's
you have to figure out how to stop being American, because that's the thing. It's so ingrained in us to our leaders have approval ratings, and we get to vote on them, and they're supposed to represent us, and none of that applies to the church, and none of that is how Jesus set up the church.
Well, and everyone's opinion matters, so you have to be listened to, right?
Right. Because I was telling people, I said, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, you have an obligation in the United States to express your opinion, almost. You know what I'm saying? If you're not expressing your opinion, you're falling short of your civic duty, and it's not like that with the church.
Right. Yeah, it is. It's viewed as, patriotic to vote. That's just a whole nother tangent that I won't get into. But, yes, you kind of have to learn to not be American in how you approach the church, and that's where I think understanding how church authorities kind of always worked is helpful. And as converts, I think you got to take the rough with the smooth. So of course we love everything the church teaches, and it can be frustrating if it seems like leaders of the church aren't sticking to that. But God knows who's leading the church on earth, and God's still in charge. So the God that told Samson he can't cut his hair and told Adam and Eve not to eat from a very specific tree is aware that there's a man in white that says things that may drive you crazy, and you've just gotta go with it.
I just trust that the Holy Spirit brings into the spirit of the church the charisms that are needed in the moment. And again, it's just trust.
And
I tell people, if you want to be negative, just think maybe this has been God's inflicting this on you to teach you something. You don't even have to. You can find all sorts of ways to come to grips with it.
Because life is just too good, so God had to. Things were just going so great otherwise that there had to be something.
A little extra.
Yeah,
shave a little time off.
I would tell people. That we get the leaders we deserve, and God makes sure of it. And so if you are criticizing the leaders, then you are saying a lot about the faithful. And when people were complaining that the Holy Father wasn't defending the truth on this topic or that topic, well, they were very used to John Paul II maybe being vocal on this, or Benedict XVI, but nobody ever backed him up. So of course eventually we would get a pope that also, you didn't want to be the only one sticking his neck. If you want to go there, but this isn't the topic. Sorry to go off on tangents. I nerd out about this Pope stuff lately.
No, well, actually, I'll super appreciate it, because even though we set time frames on this stuff, this has been a very good conversation, and I appreciate you joining us. So
definitely,
this was fun. Thanks for the invite. Have me back whenever. I loved it.
So what are you doing tomorrow night? All right. Well, thank you for nerding out with us, Zac Mabry. We are the Catholic Nerds. Scott Smith,
Colby Allen,
Mary Reed,
and Cody Reed.
Please do subscribe to this podcast and share it with all your friends, Catholic or not. And remember, they would have gotten away with it if it weren't for those meddling kids, the Little Rascals. Good night, folks. Still working on that ending.
And clap.
Loved it.
Bum 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 bum